Carl here from Wani, and once again I have the great pleasure of catching up with an artist whose talent and reputation precedes him, from multiple chart-topping albums with Alter Bridge as well as Slash and the Conspirators, to name but a few. I am joined today by one of my favourite personalities to talk music with. It is, of course, none other than Myles Kennedy. And Myles, once again, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out once again. I'm always so grateful to see your face, man.
Oh man, that's very wonderful. It's great to see you, man. Thanks for taking the time and having me on.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. So just to start off, I've been fortunate enough to have heard your sophomore solo record now, the Ides of March, and I just want to take a brief moment to congratulate you on it, man. It is a stunningly good piece of work, so I just wanted to get that off my chest straight off the bat.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So to support your previous solo album, you went out on this hybrid tour of sorts, playing both acoustic and full band shows, and I managed to catch you on that a couple of times, including here in Dublin, Ireland, and that show specifically as well has fallen into the stuff of myth and legend, just so you know, here locally. But, you know, is it unusual for you to be releasing an album and at this point in time not sure when you can properly tour it?
Yeah, that definitely adds a whole level of. I don't even know how to answer it, because when we were trying to figure out when to release this record, I was very aware there's a chance you might not be able to tour it immediately. Who knows when things will get back to normal? But I felt like, because of a lot of the subject matter of the record, it was appropriate to release it while some of the themes were still kind of relevant, and the shelf life hadn't really expired. So that kind of precedence for me.
Absolutely. And it's been really interesting to discover that quite a few musicians that are releasing material right now to kind of seem to sit on two sides of the same coin when it comes to touring. Some of them can't wait to get back on the road, while others consider their circumstances to be a blessing in disguise. They get to release new music, but they don't have to leave their families, their dogs, their cats, their homes, all these things. And I'm kind of wondering, on which side of the coin do you sit, Myles?
A little bit of both.
Right.
I genuinely miss performing and seeing the fans. There's something about that ritual that has such a important role in my life, and has for as long as I can remember. But at the same time, I have really enjoyed waking up in my bed and hanging out with my wife and my dog, and now we've adopted the neighborhood feral cat, which has been a whole new thing as well. There's this black cat that used to hang around the neighborhood for years, and it's a beautiful cat, and he was just this feral cat would just run around, and he started taking a liking to my wife. So my wife would be out gardening or whatever, and this cat would just hang out and watch her. And now he lives in the house, and he's cool, man. His name is Azrael, Angel of Death. He's totally badass.
Azrael Kennedy, I love it. Yes. I love that. That's so cool. That's definitely that. There's a good chance that Azrael Kennedy may be the headline of this interview. We'll see how the boss feels. That's just too cool not to consider.
Sweet.
And just to touch back on the approach you took to touring Year of the Tiger, incorporating both solo shows as well as full band shows into your tour dates. Have you given any consideration as to whether you would follow suit with the Ides of March tour? Would it be a combination of both again, or would you perhaps stick to one this time around?
No, I'd like to do the combination. I thought that was it was fun, and it felt like the people who came to the shows enjoyed that, and I'm a weird one, because I do love playing acoustic, but I also love to rock out, and the band is they're awesome dudes, and it's a family affair, and so I hope if the world can reopen in time to do a little bit of both again.
Awesome. And I'd be absolutely crucified here in Dublin if I didn't ask you, are you considering coming back here to add to that legendary show that you had?
Oh, absolutely. I'm, it's funny. I remember that show really well.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorites. In fact, someone recently posted a picture from like behind this backstage, looking out into the audience of that show, and I gave me the feels. I was just like, oh, that was just such a fun night. It was a great audience.
Love it. That's going to give me so much kudos now as well. So thank you for that one.
Cool.
And I heard you say, that as you said there, the majority of this record was written between March and July 2020. And it could be argued that you're easily one of the busiest musicians out there right now. And I remember the last time we spoke, you had said how finding the time to do Year of the Tiger was a challenge. And I'm curious, with the Ides of March, would we still have this record coming out on May 14th had the pandemic not taken you off the road, or is it kind of a result of that?
I think there would have been a record, because I knew that I had a kind of a studio date, not set in stone, but because I've got these three different bands and everything very scheduled at this point, everything's kind of got to follow. It's like I kind of have a 3-year plan at all times, and
Wow.
So I knew that if I wanted to do a solo record, I would have to get in there in the fall of last year. And I was concerned. I remember having the conversation with my manager, like, I don't know how I'm gonna write a record between now and then, because we were touring the Walk the Sky record. Mm-hmm. And then the lockdown happened, and I had all the time in the world. So to answer your question, yeah, there would still have been a record, but it certainly, I don't think I would have had the time to focus on. And I don't know if the songs would have been as inspired lyrically, because there was plenty to draw from, just given everything that was going on in the world. And so there was no shortage of inspiration.
Absolutely. And it's kind of cool that you say that, because, not to get too deep into the weeds here, but, you were saying there that there was plenty to draw on, and, a lot of the lyrics were kind of especially relevant to the time that we were going through right now. And when you're trying to make sense of that period and then try and reflect that process in kind of a lyrical narrative, I'm curious how you arrive at that point. How do you take that sense of ambiguity and unknown that we're living in, and how do you synthesize that in the studio? How do you capture the essence of what we're going through and make it work in a song?
Well, I think it's just trying to be, I guess, vulnerable enough and allow yourself to feel these things, and then let those emotions manifest themselves in the songs. And I think I've been doing it for so long, you learn how to approach that on each record. But for me, what's difficult with an album like this, especially in the times we live in, is now, and I wasn't even as cognizant of this when I first started writing the record, which was in March and April, when things hadn't gotten quite as polarized and political. I was looking at a lot of this just from a humanity standpoint and survival, and I didn't know what was going to happen. Nobody did. It was early on. Nobody understood where things were going. And then as it all played out, it became more of like there was almost a political thing that was going. It was just, it got really complicated. So for me, the prism that I was viewing the world through initially with these songs had nothing to do with any of that. It was really just about uncertainty and you're talking to a full-on germaphobe here, and a hypochondriac. So you unleash a virus into, I mean, not you unleash, but a virus ends up coming out and changing the world, and everything slows down. So the guy who washes his hand 50 times a day already is now so it was an interesting thing. And so I try to just look at it from an emotional standpoint, and it's not. My fear is that things are so polarized now that people will look at some of these songs as some sort of like political statement. That's just not the case. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's from a human standpoint, and I really want to make sure that that's understood.
Yeah, so it's more the arc of the narrative is more kind of a commentary than it is a criticism on things. Would that be fair to say?
I would like to think so. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would absolutely agree. And when I first listened to Year of the Tiger, I got the impression that it was an incredibly vulnerable, cathartic record. That it took the time to reflect on certain things that informed a great deal of your life. And I remember thinking at the time that this record fills my heart even as it breaks it, you know. And with the Ides of March, lyrically, it feels like it's questioning the world around you more than reflecting on the life, you know, the life you've lived in the way that the Year of the Tiger did. Is this a fair assessment, or am I completely off the mark here?
No, you're dead on. I think that it is just asking questions, and also I think trying to provide myself with mantras to help function in the world that we're currently living in. And you know, my favorite line on the record comes from the title track, and it's the second half of the song. And there's a line, "Cool heads prevail in times of change," which has become very important to me because there was so much uncertainty and things are changing so rapidly. There can be a tendency to get kind of worked up or fearful or whatever the emotion is that is kind of, if you're looking at a meter, it's in red, right?
Right.
And it's the idea of cool, you know, calm down and try and gain some perspective, take a deep breath and let that back off a little bit, and that's been something as somebody who's struggled with anxiety his whole life that I've needed to get better at regardless of the times we're living in. So I think that it's what I hope is that I'll listen to this record in 10 years and there'll still be, like, in stride. You know, you could look at that kind of this funny, like the video kind of paints this picture of, or let's just say you've just read the lyrics. It's like a zombie apocalypse or something, and it's like about doomsday prepping and calm. It's the same thing. Cool down, baby. You know you're going to burn out in time. But it could also just be very universal of, like, you know, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. You know, somebody told me that once, and it really, which I thought was really wise advice. And it's the idea of, you know, try and gain some perspective and just get that meter back out of the red.
I love that. And, you know, just as a side note, I really appreciate you, you know, you kind of talking to me, not just about the overall scope of what you're talking about, but some of the more kind of the niche narratives there as well. So thank you very much for sharing that with me. I'm always fascinated to hear this. And, you know, I know you've got 11 tracks on this record, and as I said, I love the record. I know most of them, as you said, were written last year, but there are two, Wanderlust Begins and Love Rain Down, which you said were over a decade old, and they've made their way, they found a home now on this record, which is so cool. You know, by the time the record was finished, had you emptied the vault, or are there still songs left over like that you may use in the future, such as Wanderlust Begins, Love Rain Down, that came back home this time?
Plenty of songs in the vault. Yeah.
Wow.
They're out there on hard drives and on the phones, on the voice memo thing. There's so many that are sitting there, whether they're done or in their embryos or whatever it is. You know, it's funny. Mark Tremonti and I have talked about this, because both of us do write a lot, and we love writing probably more than just about anything, and other than our families. But it's and he said something that I totally agreed with, which is the world only probably hears about 10% of what you've created.
Wow.
and which is kind of strange, because you wonder, gosh, and in the other 90%, is there a real gem in there that might make a difference in someone's life, or is the other 90% just crap that you don't want anybody to hear? You know, because you don't hit it out of the ballpark every time you get up to bat. You know, you gotta have those songs that this is not your best work, and you don't want that to come out. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's interesting. So I still have some favorites that I really would like to release. There's one song actually I wrote during this batch of songs that I wrote for it was inspired by my stepfather. Mm-hmm. And it really I've played it for some people, and it seems to have a certain effect, but it didn't fit the arc of the narrative of this record. And I knew that if I put it on this record, even though it was a song that people seem to like, it just wouldn't make sense. You would have gotten to it and been like, wait a minute here, this record, he just took a turn here. What's going on? So I hope to release that at some point.
Yeah, I would love to hear it, because I'm sure you remember here in Ireland when you were here with Alter Bridge, the couple of times that you were, your folks came out to those shows and you introduced them to the audience. I don't know if you saw everyone in tears, everybody. So that's awesome. I'm not surprised that that song's had an impact. And it's funny that you say you're talking to Mark about that, because I've talked to Mark before and he's talked about how, I think one of the things I'm paraphrasing here is he was like, nobody knows actually just how good a lead guitarist you are, that you don't do it all the time, and I know you're noodling on guitar like every day, but when I listen to this record, one of the things that's incredibly big and incredibly at the forefront, not just in volume but in your performance, is the lead guitar. If I was just discovering the guitar now and I was a teenager, I'd be like, I need to know how to play this record start to finish, and I'm kind of wondering, was this intentional? Did you go into the Ides of March thinking, I'm going to make a very lead guitar kind of driven record here, or did that just, at the end of it, you were like, we've got a lot of really great lead, kind of riffs here?
It was very intentional, yeah. So I rediscovered my love and passion for lead guitar, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And, I'd focused for so long on being a songwriter and a singer, but I started as a guitar player, and a lead guitar player in particular. And so, I just missed it. And that was part of the reason this record was more of a plugged-in amplified affair versus a full-on acoustic record, because I knew that would help facilitate that. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I forgot how much I missed playing leads. I play some lead with Alter Bridge, but not a lot. And also more blues based. This record is definitely, there's a blues based undercurrent throughout it, which that seems to be where I'm most comfortable as a lead guitar player. So it allowed me to kind of step out and do a lot of hoodlies.
Hoodly, I love that. Because it really does. It sounds like you just love every single note you're playing on this record, and not to pry or anything, but when you said you kind of rediscovered your love for playing lead guitar in the last few years, I'm kind of curious. Like, did you fall out of love with it? Was it just kind of an oversaturation from so much touring and writing and performing? How did that happen?
Well, it actually happened a really long time ago. It's interesting. So I started in this. I'm going to sound like I've been doing this since the prehistoric times, but I did start playing. I started playing in the mid '80s, and we did have color TV back then, kids. We had running water, but yeah. So that was a thing. That was what was cool, and it was fun. Then a record came out and changed everything, and it was the Nirvana. It was the big Nirvana record, right. And suddenly lead guitar was just dead. And so I started to kind of shift away. Even though I loved it, I was kind of burned out with it as well. There was things that were just oversaturated. There was too much of it. It was just kind of 80s rock had gotten to a point where it kind of run out of options. And so it was a refreshing change with the whole movement that came about in the 90s. And I really focused for the next few, almost 20 years on songwriting. That was my thing. That's what I wanted to really develop. But come about 2018 or so, I was like, I was doing some of those old licks and like, this sure is fun. It's funny. I was talking about this recently in an interview, and I think that I saw a documentary. It might have been on I would like to Crack the Sky documentary, where Brent he's talking about lead guitar playing, and he makes it, for Mastodon, and he's talking about how I think he says something to the effect of, who doesn't like to play lead guitar? It's fun, or something to paraphrase. And I was like, that is so true, because the thing about playing lead or improvising, it's very zen. You know, it's very, once you build up the musical vocabulary, you've got your bag of tricks and licks that you can. Most guitar players, if you ask any producer, they'll tell you, really, every guitar player has like his 3 licks that he just kind of reinvents and plays in each song. Right. It's kind of true. It's kind of true. So you have your three tricks, and you kind of, you know, do what you need to do and use them. But what you're doing is you're speaking a language. You know, that's the beauty of improvisation. That's why I love jazz so much. When I listen to John Coltrane, that guy is speaking fluently, crazy fluently. Miles Davis, the same sort of thing. And so, but it's about being here. It's about being present. Because the thing is, when you're improvising, if you're worried about what's coming up, or you're thinking about what you just did, you fall off. And so there's something very challenging and very beautiful and very meditative about it. And I think that's why I have rekindled my love with it.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, man. I really appreciate that. And, you know, of course, you know, it's not just your guitar work that you're known for. It's those vocals of yours as well, which are, you know, also precede you. And you still retain that, you know, earth-shaking, bluesy wails of yours and coupled with those heartbreakingly somber deliveries as well. It's just amazing. But given how much you exercise your voice, that's incredibly impressive. And it made me think of an interview I did a few years ago with Graham Bonnet, who I think is in his 70s now. Still has an incredible voice, and he feels it's actually stronger than ever. Doesn't know why, but he feels that it is. And, you know, I wonder if you feel similar, that your voice, its range, its power, has it been impacted over the years? Do you need to maintain it more, or do you have that kind of weird phenomenon where somehow it's just gotten stronger and it's just stayed?
Well, I think for me, it's you discover what your strengths and weaknesses are after years and years of touring and making records. And it took me a really long time to find, because I always consider myself more a guitar player and a songwriter. The vocal was just a necessary thing to convey the songs. So once it was obvious that I was kind of in this and that I needed to really focus more on being a singer, it took a long time to find my identity, to find the timbre that worked best, to find range-wise where I was most comfortable. And it's funny, like records will come up. I heard something that I'd done probably about 12 years ago, and I remember just being really critical of it, going, I was too up front with my mask, and I was singing it was too high, too much at the time, and as the years have gone on, I've learned to embrace my lower register a little more, and I feel like that's just more pleasing, at least to my ear. So I'm constantly evolving and learning, and with that, I feel like you get more comfortable. You understand your instrument more. So, yeah, I think that's really, you look at a guy like Glenn Hughes, he's what a monster, and it's incredible, right? So it's really inspiring. Another one is we toured probably 6-7 years ago with Aerosmith, and I actually was lucky enough. Somebody let me listen to the monitor mix that the band was hearing. Wow. And so you could really hear Steven Tyler's voice. And I was just like, you know what, man, that's so inspiring. That guy is just crushing it night after night. And because, you think you're always afraid that you're going to hit a certain point in life and your voice is going to stop working. So I'm grateful to see these guys out there still killing it. There's hope for guys like me.
I'm sure there is. I'm sure, I've no doubt. And I only have, this half hour is flown by miles. It always does when we get to hang out. And I've only got one question left for you, and it's based on a conversation I was having with my own dad recently, where we were discussing this kind of hypothetical line between what makes a song a hit and what makes a song a classic, if you will. And, I believe that there are classic songs that have never been hits and, so on and so forth. But we referenced specifically your performance here in Dublin with Alter Bridge when we watched you play Watch Over You, because nearly 15 years on, when you strike those opening chords or hand those vocal duties over to the crowd, something else entirely happens. And that moment, that resonance with the audience is a testament to that. And we're just like, that's a classic. It's a hit, but it's a classic, And I'm curious to get your thoughts on whether you feel there's even a difference between a hit and a classic. And if so, what do you think that might be?
I think that time always decides that. You bring up a really interesting subject, and there are songs that I know now as classics, and then you learn the history of it that weren't necessarily even hits. Some of them barely broke the top 40 or whatever in their genre, but yet years later they are considered iconic songs.
Yeah.
And so it's funny. It's almost like some of those tracks just get discovered. It's like that you put them out there and it might not connect immediately, but the shelf life, for whatever reason, will not expire. And it's like you know what it is? It's like a sonic fine wine, where the longer it sits there, the longer it sits there, the better it gets. So it's something that I don't understand. It's just, that's the beauty of music, right? It's you just never know.
Thank you so much for throwing your 2 cents in on a random Sunday night conversation. I love that. And Myles, thank you so much for taking the time once again. I hope I get to chat to you again soon, and also see you in person again real soon, man. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you, Carl. It's just it's been a very stimulating conversation. I appreciate it.
Made my week hearing that from you, my friend. Have a great day ahead, okay?
All right, you too, brother.
Bye now. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kev.